All right, let's unpack this. We are embarking on a deep dive today into, well, one of the most powerful and honestly kind of counterintuitive arguments you find threaded through, gosh, thousands of years of human thought. This idea that adversity, major setbacks, even outright failure, they aren't just things to avoid. They're actually essential
Yeah,
catalysts for really deep, lasting growth.
exactly. That's the core idea we're digging into today, what some have called the fringe benefits of failure.
Hmm?
Thinking specifically about J.K. Rowling's framing of this, actually, we're looking at sources that stretch way back. Ancient Stoics like Seneca, right up to modern thinkers, people like Covey, Nightingale, folks focused on success and character. Our mission really is to trace the mechanics of this transformation, how hitting what feels like absolute rock bottom, how that can actually serve as a kind of crucible.
A crucible, yeah, I like that. It burns away the unimportant stuff.
It strips away the inessential, absolutely. It forces you to discover who you really are, what you're capable of. It reveals this resilient inner self
Yeah.
and forces you, maybe for the first time, to build a solid foundation for what Rowling termed, a very good life, even after or because of failure.
It's fascinating when you look at the sources together, isn't it? Because you see the exact same psychological gears turning, whether it's someone trying to survive, political chaos in ancient Rome, or someone navigating a business collapsing today. It's the same internal toolkit.
It really is. And what's remarkable is how they all seem to land on the same fundamental point.
Yeah.
The transformation is internal. It's not about waiting for your luck to change. It's about changing the lens, right?
Yeah.
How you view the circumstances. And seeing this echoed across centuries, it just shows you there's this deep architecture to character building. And that's really what we need to explore.
Okay, so where do we start? Part one, you're saying, is about the mindset, choosing how you respond.
Right. The proactive mindset.
And here's where it gets, well, really interesting for me. Because the first step isn't about doing something. It's about observation, just watching yourself. It starts with self-awareness.
Yeah, one source calls it the unique human ability. This capacity we have to observe our own thinking, our moods, our feelings, almost like they belong to someone else.
Like you can step outside yourself for a second.
Exactly. And that self-awareness, that's the bedrock. It's the absolute foundation for being proactive, for having any control. The critical insight, the real game changer, is realizing you are not your mood. You are not your fleeting thought.
Okay, break that down. If I feel discouraged.
Right. If you're feeling discouraged, the key is realizing you are not defined as a discouraged person. You're simply the person experiencing a feeling of discouragement right now. The moment you can just notice that internal state, the thought, the emotion, that habit loop, you create a separation. You step back.
And that separation is where the power is.
That's where the dominion comes from, yeah. It lets you break really ingrained habits because you suddenly see, oh, this thought pattern, this reaction, it isn't mandatory. It's actually optional. I don't have to follow it.
And the danger is if you don't cultivate that separation, if you're just constantly looking outward for validation.
Then you get trapped by what one source calls the social mirror. And this is incredibly relevant today, maybe more than ever.
The social mirror. Explain that.
It's when your entire sense of self, your self-vision, is based only on what other people think. Their opinions, their perceptions, the immediate feedback you get. Think about it, a toxic boss's evaluation, a critical comment online, even just chasing likes on social media. If that's your only mirror, your view of yourself gets completely warped.
Like those funhouse mirrors at a carnival.
Exactly like that. Distorted, exaggerated, totally unreliable. You end up measuring yourself against shifting opinions, fleeting trends, someone else's agenda, instead of measuring yourself against, say, timeless principles or your own sense of integrity, and that just fundamentally caps your potential. It keeps you reactive.
That makes total sense. If your identity is tied to your job title or your follower count, you've basically handed the controls over to the outside world. So, okay, you develop this internal awareness. The next step is applying it to things that happen to you. External events. This is the core of proactivity, right?
Yeah.
Choosing your response.
And this is where the philosophy gets,
Yeah.
well, it gets tough. It can be hard to swallow. The sources argue, pretty consistently across the board, that what truly hurts us isn't the event itself. Not the layoff, not the criticism, not the loss. It's our internal response to it, the meaning we assign.
Sure.
Yeah. It comes down to this idea of consent. You know, Eleanor Roosevelt's famous line, "No one can hurt you without your consent."
Gandhi echoed this too, right? He said they could lock up his body, take away his freedom, but they cannot take away our self-respect if we do not give it to them. The deep injury, according to this view, isn't the external blow. It's in our willingness to let that blow define us or diminish our inner self.
Okay, but hang on. That feels like a really big statement and maybe, I don't know, a bit harsh. If someone is facing real systemic hardship, poverty, discrimination, serious illness, are we really saying their suffering is somehow a choice? Isn't that dangerously close to blaming the victim?
That's the crucial tension, you're right. And the sources, they don't really shy away from it. They try to make a distinction. It's not about denying the reality or the pain of the trauma. It's about recognizing that the ultimate power to define the meaning of that trauma and what comes next,
Hmm.
that rests solely with the individual. And yes, that involves swallowing what feels like a bitter pill. It's the acceptance piece.
Accepting what exactly? Accepting deeply and honestly something like, okay, where I am right now, my habits, my emotional state, my current situation is, in part, a result of the choices and responses I made yesterday and the day before.
Ah.
Until you take that full accountability for your response, not for the event, but for your reaction to the event, you implicitly give power to whatever is out there.
Mm.
You let it control you. It's the shift from feeling like a helpless pawn of circumstance to becoming an active agent in your own life, even amidst the wreckage.
That acceptance, facing that reality, that's the heat, the fire you mentioned.
That's the fire.
Which leads us straight to this idea of adversity as a crucible.
Exactly. You don't forge strong steel by, dusting it gently. You put it through intense heat, immense pressure. Our hardest experiences, the ones that feel like they might break us, those are the crucibles. They forge character. They develop an inner strength that, unlike external things, can't easily be taken away. And for maybe the most extreme example of this, we have to look at someone like Viktor Frankl.
His experience in the concentration camps, it's almost impossible to comprehend, but incredibly powerful in this context. Let's really get into what he discovered there.
Frankl's situation is the ultimate test case for this principle, isn't it? In a place designed to strip away every single external marker of identity possessions, freedom, name, dignity, everything, he had this profound realization. The one thing that Nazis absolutely could not touch, could not control, was his inner freedom, his ability to choose his attitude toward his suffering.
Even in that hell, he found a space for choice.
He maintained that core personal freedom. He chose to see his ordeal not just as meaningless suffering, but as an opportunity, a chance to live out his deepest values like dignity, compassion, self-governance, even there. And by doing that, by choosing that internal response, he didn't just survive psychologically himself, he actually inspired others around him. He helped keep some of them alive. It's the ultimate proof that even when external circumstances completely collapse, that internal choice, that final human freedom remains.
That level of mental preparedness, even in the face of the unimaginable, it really seems to embody what the Roman Stoic Seneca was talking about.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Seneca constantly advised practicing what he called premeditatio malorum,
Which means?
premeditation of evils, basically, thinking ahead about the bad stuff that can happen. He said, we should keep the full range of fortune's power, her unpredictability, always before our eyes. We need to be ready for whatever she might throw at us. Because if you anticipate difficulty, if you accept that, yeah, job loss happens, illness happens, betrayal happens, setbacks will come then when they do arrive. They land more gently. They don't shatter you because you weren't expecting life to be painless.
So it's not pessimism, it's preparedness.
It's realistic preparedness. His famous advice holds up. Yield not to adversity, trust not to prosperity. Don't get crushed by the bad times, but also don't get complacent or corrupted by the good times. The goal is internal balance, internal stability, no matter what the external world is doing. Your spirit remains steady.
Okay, so you've worked on self-awareness, you've accepted responsibility for your response, you've mentally prepared. Now you have to actually do something with the situation. This is where the mental flip comes in, reframing the obstacle.
Reframing is absolutely essential. It's how you break out of paralysis. When you're just focused on the emotional weight, oh God, this is awful, the unfairness, the law, you stay stuck. You're spinning in that circle of concern.
The circle of concern, let's define that clearly.
Right. The circle of concern includes all the things we worry about, but have little or no direct control over. It's full of the haves. If only I had a different boss. If only I had more money. If only the economy hadn't tanked. If only I had more time. We spend a lot of energy there.
Okay, so what's the alternative?
The mental flip shifts your focus.
Yeah.
You look past the obstacle itself, or rather into the obstacle, and you ask the crucial question. Okay, what opportunity is hidden inside this specific setback? What can I learn here? What weakness does this expose that I can now fix? What skill does this force me to develop?
So instead of being crushed by, say, a huge business failure, you force yourself to ask, okay, specifically, what did we miss? What market insight, what operational flaw did this failure reveal that I can correct going forward?
Precisely. And doing that, it immediately lessens the emotional burden because you shift from being a passive victim of the event to being an active learner, an active problem solver. You move from that circle of concern into your circle of influence.
And the circle of influence is.
That's where proactive people focus their energy. It's filled with the bees. I can be more patient here. I can be more resourceful. I can be more diligent in my research. I can be more creative in finding a solution. These are things you can directly control. Your character, your actions, your attitude.
That shift in language from have to be, it really represents a fundamental change in where you place your power, doesn't it?
It's the ultimate inside-out approach. It really is. The moment you think the problem is out there, my boss, my spouse, the economy, the government, that very thought is the problem. Because you just defined yourself as powerless. You've ceded control. The proactive person works on the bees. They change how they respond. By being different, more knowledgeable, more skilled, more patient, more loving, they actually start to expand their circle of influence. And often, over time, that growing influence starts to impact the concerns that were previously outside their control. Think about Gandhi again.
Right. He had no formal political power, no army.
Zero traditional power. But by focusing relentlessly on the bees, on his own moral integrity, his compassion, his unwavering nonviolent determination, he expanded his moral influence to such a degree that it eventually overcame the political domination of an entire empire, over 300 million people. That's the power of working from the inside out.
That pivot from mastering the internal bees to then taking effective action externally, that brings us really neatly into part 2, finding opportunity in the rubble. Let's talk about this powerful, almost folksy concept from Russell Conwell, acres of diamonds.
Ah, yes. Acres of diamonds.
Yeah.
It's such a simple, enduring idea.
And the core message is what? That opportunity isn't somewhere else.
Exactly. Conwell's whole argument is a direct challenge to that very human tendency to think the grass is always greener somewhere else, that the big score, the great wealth, the real chance is always far away. He argued people fail because they're too busy looking outward, dreaming of distant fortunes, when often the greatest opportunity is right under their noses. Literally sometimes. It's about using your own skill, with your own energy, and with your own friends, right in your immediate environment.
He apparently gave this lecture thousands of times.
Thousands. And he'd often customize it, pointing out specific, overlooked opportunities in whatever town he was visiting, things the locals had been walking past for years.
And the story he used to hammer this home, the one about the professor of mineralogy, it's such a classic cautionary tale. Can you walk us through that?
Oh, it's unforgettable. It's a perfect illustration of misplaced focus. Conwell tells that this professor, brilliant guy, knew everything about geology, minerals, mining potential, but he wasn't making money. He felt his knowledge was too valuable for the, paltry sums being offered. He knew too much to work for peanuts. So he gets obsessed with finding vast silver mines somewhere else, far away. He sells his own farm, his homestead, takes the money, and goes off on this quest for distant riches. And he fails completely. Spends years searching, finds nothing, and dies broke and disheartened. He was convinced true wealth had to be remote, exotic.
Okay, but the punchline is what happens back at the farm he sold.
Right. That's the devastating irony. The person who bought the farm, just a regular farmer, is out digging near the stream one day, maybe planting potatoes, the story varies slightly, and he hits something hard with his spade. He digs it up. It's this huge, heavy rock. Turns out it's a massive chunk of raw native silver, like 8 inches square.
Wow, so the professor was literally sitting on it.
Literally. The entire property turned out to be located on one of the richest silver deposits discovered at that time. The professor had been born there, grown up there, probably kicked that very rock 100 times. He couldn't see the fortune right under his feet because his mind was fixed on some glamorous, far-off dream of success. He overlooked the diamonds in his own backyard.
That story really lands. It shows that failure often isn't about a lack of resources, is it? It's more a failure of perception, imagination.
A failure to see the potential in the familiar. A failure of observation, again. Conwell's application was blunt, almost harsh. He'd basically say to his audience, look, if you've lived here for 20 years and haven't made a significant contribution or profit, maybe the city or your industry would have been better off without you. His challenge was intensely practical.
What was the practical advice then?
Stop daydreaming about the next big thing, the next gold rush, the next Silicon Valley. Instead, look closely. Look at the 4 blocks around you, literally and figuratively. Figure out what people right here, right now need or want that you, with your current skills and resources, can actually provide. The opportunity, the acres of diamonds, is usually tied to solving immediate local problems, meeting unmet needs that are right in front of you.
So you find that local opportunity, but just seeing it isn't enough. You need direction, focus. Which brings us to Earl Nightingale and goal setting.
Right. Nightingale hammered home the absolute necessity of having a clear destination. His favorite metaphor was the ship. Yeah. He'd say, imagine a ship leaving a harbor. It has a clear destination plotted, captain and crew, navigation charts. Even if it hits storms, 99 times out of 100, it'll reach its port. It corrects course, but it gets there. Now imagine another ship, same harbor, but no captain, no crew, no destination, just cast adrift. What happens?
It ends up lost, wrecked on a beach somewhere, or sinks.
Exactly. It's derelict. It can't possibly arrive anywhere meaningful because it has no internal guidance, no purpose, no aiming point. Most people, he argued, drift through life like that second ship.
And the way to avoid being that derelict ship, Nightingale said the secret was surprisingly simple.
Incredibly simple yet profound. He distilled it down to 6 words. We become what we think about.
We become what we think about.
If you truly internalize that, he said, your life changes instantly. Success isn't defined only by the final achievement. You become a success the moment you decide on a clear, definite, worthwhile goal and start thinking about it consistently. Because right then, you join that tiny percentage, he estimated maybe 5% of people who actually know where they're going. That clarity itself dissolves so much fear and doubt. Because now, your daily actions have purpose. You have a compass.
But just having a goal for yourself, that could be purely selfish, right? It could lead back to that dilution Conwell warned about, where you're enriching yourself but not others. How does Nightingale connect personal success with ethics?
That's crucial. He linked it through what he called the law of mutual exchange. This is the ethical governor on the engine of ambition. Prosperity, real lasting prosperity, Nightingale insisted, isn't about taking. It's fundamentally based on service. You have to be of service first before you can expect money or reward or recognition. Your return in life, financial, emotional, whatever, will be in direct proportion to the quality and quantity of the service you render to others.
Okay, but let's be real. Does that always hold up today? You see examples of people and companies accumulating vast wealth while seemingly, well, not enriching others, or maybe even harming them. Does this law still apply?
The sources would argue yes, absolutely, it holds up in the long run. Short-term appearances can be deceiving. There might be loopholes, exploitation, but they argue that ultimately the ethical constraint is unbreakable. No man can enrich himself unless he enriches others. If you try to build your success by diminishing others, by diluting their resources, exploiting their labor, breaking their trust, that action inevitably creates a corresponding self-dilution.
How so?
It dilutes your own character. It damages your reputation. It undermines the long-term viability of your enterprise. The market, or maybe just karma, whatever you want to call it, eventually corrects those imbalances. Yeah. So the highest aim isn't just personal gain. It's finding that sweet spot of mutual benefit, maximizing service. That's the path to sustainable success.
That connection between ambition and service, or enriching others, feels like a really important guardrail. Okay, so you've identified an opportunity, have set a service-oriented goal, now you start moving towards it. But especially if you're recovering from a setback, the path isn't always straightforward, is it? Adversity often forces strategic detours.
Oh, absolutely. We have this ingrained idea, maybe from too many motivational posters, that progress only means moving relentlessly forward, always forward. But the reality of navigating difficulty often requires rejecting that assumption. Sometimes the smartest, most effective way to get past what's blocking you is actually by staying put for a while, or going sideways, or even counterintuitively, moving backward temporarily.
Moving backward? That sounds like admitting defeat, doesn't it? How is moving backward progress?
It requires real humility. That's the key. It means acknowledging, okay, the way I originally planned to do this, it's not going to work anymore. Maybe the market shifted. Maybe the failure revealed a critical flaw in the plan. Maybe I need to regroup. The straight line is blocked. So instead of banging your head against the wall, you have the humility to drop the ego, accept reality, and say, okay, what unconventional route will get me to the desired outcome? It might mean pulling back entirely to rebuild the foundation. It might mean pivoting 90 degrees. The destination might remain the same, but the map has to be redrawn completely. And executing that kind of strategic retreat or sidestep takes discipline and, frankly, courage. It often feels like failure in the moment.
But it's actually strategic adaptation.
Exactly. It's recognizing that progress isn't always linear.
This brings us back inside, doesn't it? Because all these external strategies, finding opportunity, setting goals, adapting the path, they ultimately depend on your internal state. The real payoff from weathering adversity isn't just the external win, it's the character you build. Which leads us to part 3, integrity, character, and resilience.
The resilience ethic. And it starts with what the modern sources often call the private victory.
Private victory before public victory.
It's the non-negotiable foundation.
Yeah.
Real, lasting success, the kind that feels solid and earns you genuine self-respect. It flows from dominion over self, from true independence, not just financial independence, but emotional and psychological independence. And how do you build that? By making promises to yourself and then, crucially, keeping them.
It sounds so basic when you say it like that. Make and keep promises to yourself, but man, that is often the hardest thing to do consistently. It feels easier sometimes to keep a commitment to someone else, your boss, your partner, than to follow through on something you told only yourself you'd do.
It is harder. And that difficulty is precisely the point. That's where the muscle gets built. Keeping even those small, seemingly insignificant commitments to yourself. If you decide you're going to wake up at 6 a.m., you actually drag yourself out of bed at 6 a.m. If you commit to writing one page, you sit down and write that one page, even if it feels terrible. Doing that consistently, day after day, establishes profound inner integrity. It builds trust in yourself. It ensures that, as one source puts it, our honor becomes greater than our moods.
Our honor becomes greater than our moods.
Wow.
Explain that.
Well, if you only follow through on your commitments when you feel like it, when you're motivated, when you're inspired, then your moods are in charge. Your feelings dictate your actions. You're reactive. But when you follow through simply because you said you would, because you made a promise to yourself, regardless of how you feel in that moment, now you are in charge. Your word, your honor dictates your actions. You gain that dominion over self.
Okay, my honor is definitely weaker than my snooze button most mornings. So if someone's listening and struggling, even with those small things, how do the sources suggest you start building that private victory?
You start small, really small, with things you know you can control. Don't promise yourself you'll run a marathon tomorrow if you haven't run in years. Promise yourself you'll put on your running shoes and walk around the block, and then do it. Then maybe promise 2 blocks tomorrow. It's about sequencing and scale. You build tiny wins. Each promise kept, no matter how small, deposits into your personal integrity account. You build trust with yourself, gradually. And that integrity, that trust built in private, that's the only thing that can reliably support public success later on.
So private victory must come first.
It has to precede public victory, which is about successful relationships, teamwork, leadership, interdependence. If you try to achieve public victory without that solid core of private integrity, if you're relying on superficial charm, manipulation techniques, managing impressions, people eventually sense the duplicity. It's not sustainable. You have to be different on the inside first before you can create genuine, lasting, positive impact on the outside.
That internal strength, that reservoir of self-trust and integrity you build, that's what gives you real resilience when things get incredibly tough publicly, when you face collapse or massive pressure.
It's the ultimate insurance policy. It's the wellspring you draw from when everything else seems to be failing. Harriet Beecher Stowe, the abolitionist author, she captured this moment of maximum pressure so perfectly. She wrote something like, "When you get into a tight place and everything goes against you, until it seems that you cannot hold on for a minute longer, never give up then. Why? For that is just the place and time for the tide to turn."
Wow. Don't give up right at the breaking point, because that might be the turning point.
Exactly. That moment of greatest difficulty, where you feel utterly spent. That's often the climax right before resolution. But you have to be able to hold on that 1 minute longer. And the character you built in private, the promises you kept to yourself, that's what gives you the strength to hold on.
And sometimes holding on to your principles, standing by that internal integrity, it comes at a huge cost. It demands not just quiet endurance, but maybe public confrontation.
Absolutely. Sometimes resilience looks like standing your ground, even when it's incredibly unpopular or costly. You see this really vividly in the example of Malcolm X during the Civil Rights era, particularly in the early 60s. He faced enormous opposition, right? Not just from the white power structure, but also from some established black leaders at the time.
Right. He publicly challenged them quite harshly.
Very harshly. He accused them of being too accommodating, too controlled. He called them professional Negro leaders. And famously, he used that incredibly provocative phrase, describing them as black bodies with white heads.
That's incendiary language. clearly designed to provoke a strong reaction. Why was he willing to take the heat for saying things like that?
From his perspective, he was arguing that these figures had compromised their internal integrity, their private victory, for the sake of public acceptance or proximity to power, which he saw as a false public victory. He believed they were ultimately taking direction from unseen white influences. So his willingness to use that kind of confrontational language and endure the massive backlash, the scrutiny, the personal danger, it illustrates the painful cost that sometimes comes with choosing your definition of character over popularity, especially when facing powerful opposition. Maintaining integrity, by this measure, isn't always comfortable. It can involve conflict, isolation, serious reputational risk. But for the figures we're discussing, that cost seems to be deemed necessary.
Okay, let's connect this internal character, this hard-won integrity, back to how we influence others, back to leadership, communication. Aristotle, Quintilian, the classical rhetoricians argued that character, what they called ethos, is actually the most powerful tool of persuasion.
Absolutely decisive. Aristotle was clear on this. He said persuasion depends on three things: logos, logic, pathos, emotion, and ethos, the speaker's character. And he argued that ethos is the most potent of the three, especially when dealing with complex issues, matters of divided opinion, where there isn't a simple right answer. If the audience perceives the speaker as credible, trustworthy, knowledgeable, and having goodwill towards them, they are persuaded much more readily and deeply than by logic or emotion alone. And critically, Aristotle said this character, this ethos, has to be demonstrated through the speech itself. It's not just about having a good reputation beforehand. Your integrity has to shine through how you communicate.
So the argument itself is only as convincing as the perceived character of the person making it. That's huge. And Quintilian, the Roman master of rhetoric, he took it even further, didn't he? He basically said that to be a great speaker, you first have to be a good person.
That was his ultimate conclusion. The science of speaking well, he argued, is inseparable from the science of living well, of being a good human being. He said when you're giving advice, when you're deliberating about what's truly beneficial or honorable, the speaker's authority is paramount. And that authority doesn't just come from expertise, it comes from character. To be trusted, Quintilian insisted, the speaker must both possess and be regarded as possessing genuine wisdom and excellence of character. So a failure, a major setback, it often acts like a harsh spotlight on your character. If you've been cutting corners, if you lack integrity, if you're all facade, failure strips that away. And your ability to lead, to persuade, to influence, it just collapses. The struggle itself, the adversity, becomes the ongoing test of your ethos. Are you building something real inside?
That's a really powerful link, that the private, often painful work of building integrity directly fuels your public effectiveness and persuasiveness. Quintilian even had a practical tip for this, didn't he? Something about linking praise and proposals.
Yeah, it's a clever piece of advice. He said, whenever you want to praise someone, see what you would propose that aligns with that praise, and whenever you want to propose something, see what you would praise in someone who could achieve it. He's suggesting that your proposals, what you advocate for, and your praise, what you value, should stem from the same core of honorable principles. They should be two sides of the same coin. Seen this way, failure isn't primarily about losing external things, money, status, projects. The real risk in failure is the potential loss of that inner integrity. And that loss can only be avoided by conscious choice, by sustained effort, by focusing on character, especially when things fall apart. The crisis, in a way, is just a very loud reminder to focus on who you are becoming, because without that solid core, nothing else really holds up in the long run. So what does this all mean when we pull it together? We've journeyed through centuries of thought, from ancient philosophers to modern success teachers, even touching on figures like Rowling, facing modern failure, and they all seem to converge on this somewhat startling idea. The most reliable path to self-mastery, to resilience, to a truly very good life. It runs straight through the often unpleasant landscape of failure and adversity.
It's like when you face those setbacks, all the external stuff gets stripped away, doesn't it? The job title, the bank balance, the reputation, maybe even relationships. And you're left standing there with, well, with the unvarnished truth of who you are, what you're really made of.
Exactly. And the core lesson weaving through all these sources seems to be one of courage. The courage to face that truth. The courage to choose your response. Because, as Rowling herself powerfully argued, if you try to live your life too cautiously, just trying to avoid failure at all costs, you might succeed in avoiding major failure, but you'll also have failed in a much bigger way. You'll have failed to truly live. You deny yourself the very experiences that forge strength and reveal your deepest capabilities.
You deny yourself the chance to find out how resilient you actually are.
Precisely. That transformation, that forging process, it requires the courage to be vulnerable, to be seen in the struggle. There's this great image someone used about how many of us carry around this massive 20-ton shield of perfectionism.
Like 10 shield. Yeah, I feel that.
Right. We think it protects us from judgment, from criticism, from the pain of failure. But in reality, that heavy shield is often the very thing preventing us from growing. It stops us from taking risks, from being authentic, from connecting deeply, and ultimately from discovering our true potential, which is often found on the other side of failure.
So the advice is put down the shield, embrace the vulnerability, choose the courage instead, allow the difficulty to actually shape you.
That seems to be the consistent message. Put down the armor, step into the arena, be willing to fail. Because as another quote powerfully suggests, only when we're brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. That darkness includes the darkness of failure, of hitting rock bottom, of confronting our own limitations. Exploring it isn't about dwelling there. It's about finding the unexpected strength and wisdom that only emerges from that place.
Okay, so if philosophy tells us that the truly virtuous person cares more about the reality of goodness than just the appearance, and if failure has this knack for stripping away all the appearances, all the pretense, then here's the final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on. What lie, what comfortable illusion about your own life, your capabilities, your potential, or maybe the resources you think you lack? What lie is your current struggle, your current failure, forcing you, finally, to confront?